every major WW2 war crime in 21 minutes. December 13th, 1937. The city of Nanjing does not burn yet, but it will, and the silence before that moment is the cruelest part of all. Japanese boots echo on cobblestone streets, still damp from the morning fog, and the soldiers are not marching toward a battlefield. They are marching toward a population. The gates of the capital are broken open, and the world does not yet have a name for what is about to begin. 2 years before the tanks roll into Poland, the war has already started here. It begins without a formal declaration, without a warning broadcast, without even the courtesy of an ultimatum. A city of civilians wakes up under occupation, and the people of Nanjing feel the full weight of a world war before the rest of the world agrees to call it one. The outside world is watching from a comfortable distance, and the outside world chooses in this moment to say very little. As those boots grow louder and the last resistance collapses at the city's edge, the world looks away. That is the first crime. For 6 weeks the killing does not stop, and the soldiers who carry it out show no confusion on their faces. They have been told this is war. They have been told the people in front of them are the enemy, that orders are orders, that this is what victory looks like. The permission has come from the top, and at every level below it no one refuses. Along the banks of the Yangtze River, thousands of Chinese civilians and disarmed soldiers are organized into lines at the water's edge. Machine guns open up, and bodies tumble into the current one after another, and the river carries them downstream, as though the city is already trying to forget what it has witnessed. The soldiers reload, and the next group is brought forward. The Yangtze does not forget. Rivers never do. Squads push door to door, house to house, block by block, dragging men into the open and marching them to killing grounds at the outskirts of the city. They are bound together in groups, walked to the edge of prepared pits, and shot. Women and girls face horrors that language is not adequate to contain: systematic, widespread, relentless, and deliberate. The screams fill the alleyways of a city that the outside world is still deciding whether to believe. One man draws a line in the middle of the disaster and refuses to let it advance. John Rabe, a German businessman with a Nazi Party armband and a conscience that contradicts it, 200,000 civilians alive behind its boundaries. He documents everything, every atrocity, every intrusion, every murder, in a diary that shakes in his hands as he writes. American missionary Minnie Vautrin stands at the gates of Jinling College like a human wall, protecting thousands of women behind her, even as soldiers break through again and again to drag women away. She cannot stop them all. No one person can. But she refuses to move, and that refusal becomes its own form of record. The massacre kills at least 100,000 people, with most historians placing the toll between 200,000 and 300,000, and the uncertainty in that range is itself a kind of horror. The Japanese military dismisses every report as propaganda, and the outside world, uncertain what to believe from so far away, says very little in response. After the war, the Tokyo Tribunal convicts Commander Iwine Matsui for his failure to prevent the slaughter and executes him in 1948. Lieutenant General Hisao Tani is executed by Chinese authorities in 1947 for his direct role in mass killings. But most of the men who walked those streets and carried those weapons never stand before any court at all. Most of the men simply go home. A facility operates behind the clean administrative name of Water Purification Unit. It is not a water purification unit. It is something that has no precedent in the history of warfare, and its designation is Unit 731, and inside its walls the definition of a human being is formally revised. Between 1936 and 1945, Lieutenant General Shiro Ishii commands the most methodically grotesque research program that a modern military has ever produced. The facility covers dozens of buildings, employs hundreds of scientific and military staff, and processes thousands of prisoners, Chinese civilians, Korean captives, Soviet soldiers of war, and anyone else classified as an enemy of the state. These individuals are not referred to as prisoners or patients. They are referred to as logs, not people. Logs. Prisoners are infected with plague, cholera, anthrax, and typhoid, and doctors observe the progression of untreated disease with clinical detachment, writing notes in neat handwriting while the subjects deteriorate in locked cells. Others are dissected while fully conscious, their torsos opened on operating tables while their hearts are still beating and their lungs still working, their organs examined in real time. Frostbite experiments freeze limbs until they are solid, and then test various thawing methods to record tissue damage. Pressure chambers build until the blood vessels in the eyes rupture. Centrifuges accelerate until death arrives. Field operations extend the program far beyond the facility's walls. Plague-infected fleas are released over Chinese cities in controlled aerial drops, generating epidemic outbreaks that kill tens of thousands of civilians who never understand what has struck them. Water supplies are contaminated with cholera and typhoid. Infected food is distributed to villages as though it is a relief supply. The killing is never emotional. It is scheduled, documented, and filed under research categories. It is considered by everyone involved to be productive. At least 10,000 people are killed inside the facility itself. Field operations across China account for tens of thousands more. When the Soviet Union enters the Pacific War in August 1945 and the collapse of Japan becomes certain, Unit 731 destroys its own buildings, burns every available document, and executes the remaining prisoners to eliminate witnesses. Ishii and his research team return to Japan carrying data soaked in mass murder. The United States, hungry for biological warfare intelligence that its own programs have not been able to generate, grants Ishii and his top researchers full legal immunity in exchange for their findings. The data is deemed too strategically valuable to discard, regardless of how it was obtained. Ishii lives freely in Japan until 1959. Not one member of Unit 731 is prosecuted by American authorities. Not one. April 9, 1942. On the Bataan Peninsula in the Philippines, approximately 76,000 Filipino and American soldiers lay down their weapons before Japanese forces in what becomes the largest military surrender in American history. They are exhausted, half-starved, ravaged by months of jungle combat and tropical disease, and they believe, in the way that surrendering soldiers must believe, that the fighting is now finished. They are wrong about that. Japanese guards form the prisoners into long columns and order them to march. The route is more than 60 miles across the peninsula in scorching tropical heat, toward prison camps somewhere in the north. Anyone who slows down too much is beaten with rifle butts. Anyone who drops is bayoneted where they fall. Anyone who attempts to offer water to a struggling man beside them is shot. The column is kept moving by the absolute certainty of what stops means. At artesian wells along the road, guards station themselves specifically to prevent the prisoners from drinking. Men break from the column in desperate lunges toward the water and are shot in the act of reaching for it. The column packs so tightly in places that men suffocate standing upright. Others are forced to sit in open fields in direct sun for hours with nothing overhead. Others are buried alive in the roadside dirt with only their heads left above ground, left as markers along the road. The bodies that line the route form their own kind of mile markers. Between 5,000 and 18,000 Filipino soldiers die during the march itself. Between 500 and 650 Americans die alongside them. The survivors arrive at Camp O'Donnell to find conditions that offer no relief, extreme overcrowding, no functional sanitation, disease burning through the barracks with nothing to stop it. Within weeks of arrival, approximately 1,500 Americans and 26,000 Filipinos die inside the camp walls. General Masaharu Hama, commanding Japanese forces in the Philippines, is tried by an American military tribunal in Manila, convicted of failing to control his troops and prevent the atrocities, and executed by firing squad on April 3, 1946. Other officers connected to the march are tried and executed as well. The accountability for once reaches at least some of the people responsible. In the spring of 1940, the forests near Smolensk are bare and quiet and cold, and underneath the leaf mold of the forest floor, the ground is being prepared to hold thousands of men. Following the Soviet invasion of Poland in September 1939, approximately 22,000 Polish officers, doctors, lawyers, professors, judges, engineers, priests, and police officials are held in Soviet prison camps. They are the intellectual and military backbone of a sovereign nation. They are exactly the kind of people who could rebuild a country after an occupation. That is precisely why Stalin signs the order to kill them. The executions are carried out in multiple locations. In the Katyn forest near Smolensk, approximately 4,400 officers are brought in small groups, transported by truck to the tree line, and shot in the back of the head at close range with a single pistol round. Additional executions take place at facilities in Kalinin and Kharkiv. The method is practiced, efficient, and conducted with the organizational precision of a bureaucracy that has done this kind of thing before. Bodies are buried in layered mass graves beneath the forest, and the forest closes over them. The goal is not only murder, it is the surgical removal of a nation's capacity to lead itself. For 3 years, the Soviet Union denies everything categorically, and when German forces occupy the area in 1943 and discover the mass graves, they present the evidence to the international press. The evidence is largely accurate. But the messenger is the Nazi regime, which makes it easy for the Allied powers, who need the Soviet Union as a partner, to dismiss the findings as propaganda. The Soviets escalate their denial by formally accusing Germany of the massacre, and the accusation is actually raised as a charge during the Nuremberg trials, where it quietly collapses under scrutiny. Poland falls behind the Iron Curtain after the war, and public discussion of Katyn is forbidden there. Families of victims who speak out are harassed, imprisoned, or made to disappear. It takes until 1990, during the glasnost period under Mikhail Gorbachev, for the Soviet Union to officially acknowledge responsibility. Documents surface bearing Stalin's personal signature on the execution order. In 2010, the Russian State Duma issues a formal statement of acknowledgement and expresses regret. But Russia continues to resist classifying the massacre as genocide, and no prosecution of any individual is ever initiated. Memorials stand in Poland today, and the families of the 22,000 continue to push for recognition that goes beyond official language and actually names what was done and who did it. February 1945. American forces converge on Manila from multiple directions, and the liberation of the Philippine capital is close enough to feel certain. General Tomoyuki Yamashita reads the tactical map correctly and orders a strategic withdrawal from the city, understanding that defending Manila street by street means destroying it. Admiral Sanji Iwabuchi reads the same map and ignores the order entirely. He commands his naval troops to hold Manila to the last man, and in doing so he turns an entire city into a massacre site. For nearly a month, Japanese soldiers pushed through the neighborhoods of Manila in systematic sweeps. At the Red Cross building, soldiers killed doctors, nurses, and bedridden patients without distinction. At the German club, hundreds of refugees seeking shelter are locked inside and the building is set on fire, and those who break through the doors and try to run are machine-gunned in the smoke outside. At the Bayview Hotel, hundreds of women and girls are imprisoned and subjected to sustained, repeated assault for days on end. At Paco Church, soldiers execute the priests and the civilians sheltering among them, then burn the bodies to conceal the evidence of what they have done. At the Manila Cathedral, Japanese troops use grenades and bayonets against families who have gathered there believing the church will protect them. Women hold their children inside a building they chose because they thought it was sacred. The children do not understand what is happening, and the cathedral walls hold the sounds of what happens next. The destruction across the city is not incidental, not the chaotic byproduct of desperate fighting. It is building by building, room by room, with a sustained and deliberate intention to leave nothing and no one intact. When American forces secure the city on March 3, 1945, approximately 100,000 Filipino civilians are dead and Manila is in ruins. General Yamashita is tried by an American military commission. Despite having ordered the retreat that Iwabuchi defied, he is held responsible as commanding officer for his subordinates' actions, convicted and executed in February 1946. Iwabuchi dies during the battle, sparing himself the tribunal. The legal precedent established by Yamashita's conviction that commanders bear responsibility for their subordinates regardless of countermanding orders echoes through military law for the rest of the century. June 10, 1944, 4 days after the Allied landings at Normandy have begun to crack the western edge of German-held Europe, soldiers from the 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, surround the village of Oradour-sur-Glane in central France. The village has no military garrison, no resistance cell, no weapons cache, no strategic value of any kind. It is a village of farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, and school children. The SS unit has been frustrated by partisan attacks along its route north, and in that frustration it selects a village, and the village ceases to exist. At 2 p.m., troops seal every road and order the entire population into the village square for what they describe as a routine identity inspection. The men are separated from the women and children with no explanation given. Women and children are marched to the church and locked inside. The men are divided into 6 groups and herded into barns and workshops throughout the village, where machine guns have been set up and positioned inward before the roundup even began. Without warning, without order, without hesitation, soldiers opened fire on the men's legs, aiming to wound rather than to kill cleanly, drawing out the dying. Straw and wood are piled on top of the wounded bodies. The buildings are set alight. Inside the church, an incendiary device is carried in and detonated. Heavy black smoke fills the stone nave, and the women begin to scream in a register that carries through the walls. As they rush for the doors and claw at the small windows near the ceiling, soldiers positioned outside open fire on anyone who emerges. Mothers are shot at the door frames with their children in their arms. Children suffocate in the smoke before the fire reaches them. One woman, Margaret Rufansch, forces herself through a narrow window above the altar, falls to the ground outside, is shot through the legs as she runs, and survives. She is the only woman to do so. She is one of 7 total survivors from a village of 642 people. After the killing, the SS loots every building and burns the entire village to the ground before departing. When French authorities arrive days later, they find charred remains in the church and the barns, bodies still where they fell, and a village that no longer exists in any functional sense. Charles de Gaulle orders the ruins left exactly as they are, permanently, as a memorial that requires no explanation from anyone who walks through it. In 1953, 21 men are tried in Bordeaux for the massacre. Most receive light sentences. Most are free within years. The ruins remain. September 29, 1941. Notices have gone up across the Jewish neighborhoods of Kiev in occupied Ukraine. The notices instruct all Jews to present themselves for resettlement, to bring documents and warm clothing, and to arrive at a designated assembly point on the morning of September 29th. The language is administrative. The tone is bureaucratic. Tens of thousands of men, women, and children arrive at the assembly point because the alternative, not appearing, seems more dangerous than compliance, and because they do not yet know what the word resettlement means in German. They are marched in columns toward a ravine in the forest outside the city called Babi Yar. As they approach, they are instructed to surrender all valuables, then their outer clothing, then everything remaining. Groups are organized at the lip of the ravine, forced to lie face down across the bodies of those already killed below, and shot in the back of the head. The executioners are members of Einsatzgruppe C, supported by German Order Police, Ukrainian Auxiliary Police, and Wehrmacht units working in coordinated rotating shifts. In 48 hours, 33,771 people are murdered at Babi Yar. Survivors later describe the ground continuing to move for days, the soil shifting above those who were buried still alive and were still trying to surface.